We are recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this AIM Center webinar, Features in Accessibility, Google's Chromebook Tools in Practice. My name is Luis Perez. I'm a Technical Assistance Specialist with the National AIM Center at CAST, and I'm so happy that you're joining us this afternoon. This webinar is being live captioned, and to view the captions, make sure you select the closed caption button in your Zoom interface, and the captions will appear along the bottom of the screen. We encourage you to share with each other and to interact with each other in the chat to make sure that everyone can see your posts. Make sure you choose all panelists and attendees from the drop-down menu above the text entry field where you type your comments and your questions. We do have a Q&A feature available with this Zoom webinar, so we encourage you, if you have questions, to post those in the Q&A. So use the chat to interact with each other, and use the Q&A to ask questions that we can then flag for the presenters. Because as you can imagine, on a webinar with this many people, the chat is going to be fast and furious. So it may be difficult to find your question amongst all the comments. So please make sure you use the Q&A to submit your questions, and we will flag those for the presenters. And we'll try to have some time at the end so that we can do some live Q&A once the presentations are completed. There are some materials for this webinar. We have prepared a handout that has a number of the keyboard shortcuts that the presenters are going to mention, the extensions that they're going to talk about, as well as some resources that you can use to continue learning about Google accessibility following the webinar. The handout and other materials are available on the AIM Center website. Leslie is going to share a short URL that you can use to access that handout. It is bit.ly, and then /AEM Google Chromebook. And
I'm sorry, Luis, and I apologize. I have the long links in the chat because Zoom does not hot link bit.ly links. I apologize. So there's some longer links in the chat if you want to have a hot link.
No problem. Thanks so much, Leslie. And that same page is where you're going to be able to access the recording. So we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be available about a week from today because we close caption it, and it takes about a week for the closed captioning to be complete. So definitely check out that page for the handout and the recording as resources that you continue to refer to in the future. So with that out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to our awesome presenters today. We have with us Kara Booker. She's a Chrome and Chrome OS Accessibility Program Manager at Google. And Sean Arnold, who's a STEM coach with District 75 in New York City. So Kara and Sean, do you mind introducing yourselves real quick? And then I'm going to turn over the screen sharing to you, Kara.
Great. Thanks, Luis. As Luis mentioned, I'm Kara Booker, and I am a program manager on Chrome and Chrome OS Accessibility.
And Sean?
I'm a STEM coach and special educator in New York City's District 75, which in New York City, that's essentially the citywide district for students with moderate to severe disabilities. Right now I'm at school here in Brooklyn in Cypress Hills. So if I have to throw a mask on at some point, it's because somebody walked into the room. I think as a larger scale role, we have the largest, I know we have the largest G Suite for any school in the country, with like 1 million+ students. Might be larger, one of the larger ones in the world. So yeah, we make massive use of Google tools and things for the accessible needs for our students.
Great. So looking forward to your presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kara.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to stop my video for right now. I'm having a bit of bandwidth issues, so I'll go into the presentation. Okay. Luis, can you see my screen?
I sure can. We're good to go.
Great. So in this presentation, we're going to cover a number of different things about Chromebook accessibility. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about why accessibility matters, which I'm sure that you're all very familiar with. And then we'll talk a little bit about different accessibility features that are built into the Chromebooks. And Sean will also jump in with some anecdotes and stories about tips and tricks about how that works. And hopefully we'll be able to get to some extensions as well. So why accessibility matters? 15% of the world's population has some form of a disability. And we like to categorize disabilities in a few different buckets to make it just a little bit easier to conceptualize and to talk about, and also to provide a framework for some of the built-in accessibility features that we're going to be talking about later. So the first bucket that we like to talk about is vision, and that can include blindness, low vision, color blindness, farsightedness. And then our second bucket is hearing, so deaf or hard of hearing. And then third, we have motor. So that can range from total paralysis or limited dexterity and mobility. And then our fourth bucket is cognitive. So that includes challenges in processing information, and that may affect organization, communication, focus, reading, writing, etc. So this number is compounded when you factor in situational and temporary disabilities. So for instance, a situational disability could be if you're in an environment and it's highly distracting and you're having trouble focusing, you may receive information a little bit differently. Or if you sprain your wrist, this could be a temporary disability, and then you may have trouble typing or pressing down on the touchpad. So at some point in everyone's life, they'll be impacted by some form of situational, temporary, or permanent disability, whether it's yourself, your friends, your family members, etc. So estimates suggest that there are at least 93 million children living with some form of permanent disability worldwide. And that boils down to 1 in 5 school-aged children which have special needs in the United States. So access or lack thereof can really shift someone's entire trajectory in life. And before we dive into some of the features themselves, I'd like to go ahead and start with this powerful quote from a teacher that we talked to at a conference. She said that inclusion with assistive technology in Chromebooks has increased the ability for students who would typically be taken out of class to now be in the class getting the same knowledge, the same vocabulary, same content as other students, and allows students to be part of their peers and more socially accepted. And this is also important from a remote schooling perspective to have the tools necessary to succeed. So accessibility features are built into our solutions from the get-go. So they're easy to use, and it doesn't require a lot of additional work and lift. And this means that every single student or teacher of all types of abilities and learning styles should have the opportunity to set up their learning environment in a way that works for them. So we're going to be focusing more on features built into Chromebooks today, shown in this inner circle. So I'm going to hop out of presenter mode for a second, and just out of curiosity, how many people are currently using Chromebooks either personally for your schools or for both? And feel free to type your answer into the chat. And I'll pause the share for a second so I can see the responses. Awesome. Great. So quite a few people are already using Chromebooks. That's great. So just to give you a quick overview for those of you that may be newer to Chromebooks, Chromebooks are lightweight, high-speed computing devices, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. So some of your devices may be touch, others may be clamshell, etc., but they're all designed to be running cloud-based apps with speed, simplicity, and security in mind. And so my team works on what's called the Chrome operating system, or Chrome OS, and all of the Chromebook models, so whether you're using Dell, HP, Samsung, Pixelbook, etc., they may have different hardware, but they're all using the same Chrome operating system. So what that means is when you boot them up, it's going to be the same experience no matter what hardware you use. And that's going to be the same for accessibility features that we're going to be talking about today. So the other thing that we really like to hone in on is that Chromebooks are designed to be easily shareable. So I know it's a little bit different in remote classroom environments these days, but in classrooms, for example, that are not one-to-one model, if you have a student who signs into a Chromebook with their account, and then let's say they leave the classroom and use another Chromebook, or they go home and use another Chromebook within the family, but sign in with that same account, if they've customized any of their accessibility settings, those are going to be transferred to their account that they're signing into on a new device. And so you don't have to worry about reconfiguring or customizing your experience every single time that you sign into a new device. So that's a really nice way to just be able to share the devices, whether it's with family members or other classmates. Okay. So we want to empower students to use the same set of tools while customizing their own learning environment. And this includes features that are built in for those that are blind or low vision, like magnifiers and voice typing, or for Braille support. And then it also includes features for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And we know that many of you are perhaps not aware of some of the features that are built in. So, so we wanted to go ahead and spend some time diving into those. Okay, so I'm going to hop it out of presenter view again. And before we dive into some of these features that make content easier to see, I wanted to just briefly show you how to set up accessibility settings to always appear in your status tray. So you'll go to Chrome OS settings and search for accessibility. And then there's an option here that says always show accessibility options in the system tray. It's toggled on right now for me. So what that means is if I go in the system tray here, then I'll see accessibility, and I can easily navigate to any of these accessibility settings directly through the status tray and enable or disable them. Great. So there's a number of ways to make things larger on the screen. But the first, probably most basic way to zoom in is what we call browser zoom. So if you just press Control and the plus key to increase, and then Control and the minus key to decrease, or Control 0 to reset, that will allow you to zoom in on the actual browser itself. So this is really great for some people. It's a great way to zoom into core content on the browser page. And for others, they may want to make everything a little bit bigger. So all you have to do is add in the Shift key. So Control Shift plus to increase and Control Shift minus to decrease. And this will make everything bigger or smaller, including your shelf, your icons, and your tabs. So let's say a student has more significant vision loss and may need to make or may need a much higher level of magnification. So in this case, you can use one of two built-in magnifiers that are in accessibility settings of the Chromebook. So the first one is a Fullscreen magnifier, and this zooms everything up to 20 times. And there's a few different ways that you can adjust the zoom level as well. So you can leave it on the default zoom level, and then you can just press Control and Alt, and then the brightness up key, and everything is increased. And then you can tab around, and it follows the focus where you're at. And then you can zoom back out as well. So I'll hop out of presenter view again and just show you briefly what that looks like. Okay, so Control Search M to turn on the magnifier, and then Control and Alt, and I'm going to use brightness up, to zoom in up to 20 times. I can tab around and I can zoom back out. Also with Control Alt and either 2 fingers with the touchpad up to zoom in, or 2 fingers and scrolling down with the touchpad to zoom out. So the full screen magnifier is really great for some users. And we collected feedback from users over the years and realized that people that are using a higher level of zoom, it can be really difficult to orient yourself on the screen. So especially when you're trying to pan around so much. So we took this feedback and we decided to make what's called our docked magnifier. So I'll go ahead and play this video as I'm describing what it is. So when the docked magnifier is on, essentially what it does is it takes up the top 1/3 of the screen and makes it a magnified region. And then at that point, everything else resizes on into the remaining 2/3 of the screen. And then you use your mouse cursor to pan around, similar to with the full screen magnifier. And then what is being showed in that zoomed in portion, you can see as you're panning around. So the keyboard shortcut to turn this on is Control-Search-D as in docked, but no need to memorize any of these shortcuts. As Luis mentioned, he'll provide a list of those shortcuts. They can also be found in the Help Center. You can always turn on these accessibility settings through the Chrome OS settings or through the status tray. So just to recap real quick, we have a number of different features available to magnify the screen. So we went over, you can zooming into your browser content. And then we also went over increasing the size of all of the items on your screen, including your icons. And then our 2 built-in accessibility settings. So our full screen magnifier to zoom up to 20 times, and then the docked magnifier to zoom the top 1/3 portion of your screen. So the next few features that I'm going to talk through are great to use in conjunction with magnification, or you can use them as standalone features depending on your needs. And they can be really helpful for students who may have low vision, but also helpful for students that have trouble focusing or processing information. So next we have our adjustable mouse cursor. And when you turn this on in accessibility settings, essentially there's a sliding scale that appears underneath the toggle. And basically you'll just choose whatever size works for you. So we have a new feature that was just released in Chrome OS 86, where you have the ability to change the color of the mouse cursor. And there are seven different colors that you can choose from, and this helps with to provide a little bit better visibility for those who have some trouble with the black mouse cursor. So next up, there's a feature that we call highlights, and this helps draw greater visibility for some of the key parts of the screen. And there's essentially 3 different ways that you can highlight key areas. So you can either highlight around the mouse cursor or the text caret that as you're typing, or keyboard focused items. So for instance, if you're using a tab shift or the arrow keys and you want a little bit of a stronger focus indication. So you can enable these 1, 2, or all 3 at the same time if you choose to do so. And so when this feature is on, you'll have a colorful focus ring that appears just when the item is in motion. So for example, if you're moving the mouse cursor, the ring will appear around the cursor as it's in motion, and then as you stop, it fades away. So the idea isn't to create more clutter or add more distraction, but to just have that visual cue for important pieces of information on the screen. We also have what's called high contrast mode, and this basically inverts the colors on the screen. So this can be really beneficial for anyone who is light sensitive, or a lot of the content that we tend to look at on the internet or in apps happens to have a light background, so with dark text. And for a lot of people, this can create some strain on their eyes looking at this all day long. and looking at a bright screen. So being able to toggle this on can be really helpful. And again, this can be also be found in accessibility settings, or there's a keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-H to turn it on. So next we'll go ahead and dive into some of our spoken feedback features. So on Chromebooks, we have two different forms of spoken feedback. And I'll start by talking about the Chromebox screen reader, which is really meant to be full system spoken feedback. So as you navigate around, it will verbalize everything for you. And you can turn this on at any point in accessibility settings, or the keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-Z as in zebra. And this can be turned on even from the very first time that you open a Chromebook. So there are lots of different improvements that our team has been making over the years with Chromebox Screen Reader. And over the last few years, we've been working on making just in general a faster, more consistent experience altogether. And we've been simplifying a lot of the keyboard shortcuts so you don't have to hold down quite as many keys at once. And you can really efficiently navigate through your screen. So for instance, basic linear navigation is the search key, and for those who aren't familiar with Chromebooks, the search key is located just above the shift key on the left-hand side. So you'll press search and the right key or left key. And you'll be able to navigate through your entire Chromebook this way. And there's a number of jump commands as well. And so when you press search plus period, you're brought into this set of menus, and then you have access to all of your different jump commands, and you can navigate through different parts of speech options to make adjustments to your pitch or your rate, and many more options. So this menu is really meant to be your one-stop shop for all things Chromebox. One thing that we did recently add was the ability to search the menus. So since there's a lot of information that you can find here, it can be nice to just quickly search for whatever it is that you're looking for, and be a big usability improvement. And we also added the ability to have automatic voice switching if you have different languages. So now if you're navigating a page with multiple languages, Chromebox will be able to seamlessly transition in between the different languages as long as those are on the device. And we also have some additional speech customizations in the Chromebox option page. So this can include how you'd like the numbers to be verbalized and a few other items. And then we've added smart sticky mode as well. So we have this mode called sticky mode, which means you can double tap the search key. And as you're navigating around, it allows you to click and hold down less keys. So typically when you're navigating around Chromebox, you would hold the search plus right key to navigate item by item on the screen, and then the left arrow key to go backwards. Or let's say you wanted to navigate the screen by buttons, then you would hold down the search and the letter B to cycle through all of the buttons. And then you can press search shift B to go backwards through the buttons. But let's say you're really in this consumption mode and you just want to be able to hold down less keys at once. So sticky mode will basically make it so that the search key is sticky, and then you can just hold it down, and you won't have to hold it down anymore. And you can just press the right arrow key to move item by item, or left to go back. And similar with buttons, press B to navigate through the buttons. And we've made some improvements to sticky mode. So once you get into an edit field, it automatically boots you out of sticky mode so that you can type. And as you type different keys, you don't have to worry about executing any unwanted keyboard commands. And then as soon as you exit the edit field, you're out of sticky mode. And then last, we've also, over the years, worked on a set of navigational sounds. So for context, as you're navigating around the screen, you're going to hear the spoken feedback, and you're also going to hear sound effects behind the spoken feedback. So for example, when you get to a button, or you get to a link, or when a page is loading, there are lots of different subtle sound effects that are behind that spoken feedback for additional clues. So we've added a new set to be a little bit more discreet. And we've also added stereo positioning for the ear cons. So for example, if you navigate to a button that's on the left side of the screen, you're actually going to be able to hear that ear con in your left speaker or left earbud. And then similarly, if you navigate to a link on the right side, you'll be able to hear that in your right ear, which can be really helpful addition of context for the visual layout of the screen. Great, so we also have Braille support, and that goes hand in hand with Chromebooks. So we support Braille devices and displays that are either plugged in through USB or through Bluetooth connection. And we've been working on more and more functionality for Braille display over the past years. And not only just reading Braille output, but also executing more Braille keyboard commands. So let's say you're working with students that are wanting to spend a little bit more time on the Braille display itself. It's helpful to not have to shift between the Braille display and the keyboard quite as frequently. So that's Chromebooks, and there's quite a bit more to talk about. We could spend hours just talking about Chromebooks, but I wanted to go ahead and shift gears and talk about our second option of using spoken feedback, which is called Select to Speak. So Select to Speak is really meant more so for on-demand screen reading or of just certain text that you're selecting or parts of the screen that you're selecting. And this is widely applicable for anyone with low vision, processing challenges, focus challenges. And we've also found that it's really helpful for those that are learning a second language as well. So there's a few different ways that you can access this. First, you can click on there's a Select to Speak icon that appears in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and it looks like sound waves. And then you can use the touchpad to click on an item or drag a box around the content. And then essentially what happens that the content that you've selected will be read aloud. And then you can press the control key to silence the speech at any time. And then another way that you can use this feature is to press and hold down the search key and then use the mouse or touchpad to click and drag a box around the content. So there's also word-by-word highlighting available as text is spoken, and that just helps give a visual cue to follow along with the words as they're reading aloud. And we have a new feature in Select to Speak, which allows you to shade the background. So once you select the text that you would like to be read aloud, there's also an option to shade everything else to a gray behind it. So you can really focus in on that core piece of content that you're trying to listen into or visually read. So we're really excited about that. And we're hoping that this will help promote better focus for students. So Chromebooks have a number of different voices as well as languages that are already built in. But we also have a partnership with a team called Acapella, and they're outside of Google and are really experts in building voices across many different languages that can be used in Chromebooks now. And you can purchase these voices through the Chrome Web Store. They're only a few dollars each, or they have a site, they offer site licenses as well to schools. And this really opens up a lot of different doors because they have 30 different languages and over 100 voices. And they also create children's voices, which we just really love about Acapella as well. We've heard a lot of research around really young learners and how the younger sounding children's voices on text to speech can really resonate a lot better for them versus the adult, perhaps more robotic sounding voices. So if you're curious, I would definitely recommend checking out the Acapella voices. And before we go into features for improved motor interactions, I wanted to see if there's any questions and also hand it off to Sean to talk through any anecdotes or tips and tricks for the features that we've just discussed.
To start with, I would add to the four that you spoke about that Chromebooks and the accessibility features reach, hearing, cognitive. I would add, you sort of spoke to it throughout, sort of learning as well and learning needs, because even though things like autism spectrum disorder fall under a cognitive disability, things like learning disabilities or other types of neurodiversity are addressed through a whole bunch of other representation tools that exist inside of Chromebooks. And part of that that's big is that, again, Kara spoke to this, the ability of it to be customized and personalized. So even if you don't have one-to-one devices, even if it is an issue where you're doing hybrid things and you're cleaning things for students, like it's happening somewhat here now, you can have different students log in and all their custom accessibility features are right there for you. So as long as those are linked to your G Suite accounts, they're good to go. Students have all those accessibility features right when they come right in, and understand that the things that make good accessibility, inclusivity, are the things that make good instruction. It's all about knowing your students really well and designing your learning for the needs of those students. And this, that I should have to say, but I have had to say it a lot, even in my district. All these accessibility features are not cheating. Whether a student uses select to speak, right, to hear the text read to them, it is not like they're having somebody read it for them wholly. Not that that's an issue either. It is whether that student is a multilingual learner or they're a struggling reader or they have a visual impairment. This is them hearing the information. They still have to process it. They still have to comprehend it and synthesize it and put it back out there. But what they are getting is each word at a time. They're learning it as it goes. And it's sort of that bridge to where they need to go. I'll give one particular experience for one. We were talking about magnification, specifically with Docked Magnifier. We had one student who had a paraprofessional or assistant teacher who constantly needed to be with him, so that he could dictate to her to go ahead and input information in on the keyboard on the Chromebook, because he just couldn't do it right. People thought it was a cognitive delay. It turns out that as I was working with him, we determined that no, he could use the speech, and it was more of a visual impairment, where once we used magnification, he could see the words, he could see what was there. So he was able to do it almost entirely independently at that point, and that was our goal, ultimately, to have the students be as independent and to able to access the world and their learning as much as possible on their own. A couple other ones for representation I'll just quickly throw out there before we get back into interactions. Captions across the board on slides and in Meet, and now the live captions apps on Android and stuff. Those are really awesome for our students with hearing impairments. Google Lookout and Google Lens, even though Google Lens isn't, they're tools that are not necessarily made with quote accessibility in mind, but they're great for accessibility. Google Lens can tell people everything that's around them from a book, as well as Google Lookout, what kind of money is in front of you. And then just understand that things like the collaboration features that are built into all of Google's tools, that itself is an accessibility feature when our students can get help even remotely on a document or a thing that they're working on, something that they're struggling with. The fact that it's collaborative, that they can hop into this Jamboard or this Google Doc together with an instructor or a prepare professional and get that help live immediately. That is access being given to them through the help that's available there. And beyond that, the ability for instructors to differentiate instruction in classroom, that I can send specific work to these 3 kids and these other 2 kids get something slightly different. And then in a Google form, I can create a differentiated sort of looping pathway where when students need remediated help, if they get a question wrong, it automatically takes them to try it again with better, further information. So are the ways to do that. I know we've got that resources and links all about how to do that stuff in the later things, so I'm not going to babble on about it, and we can continue and you can see the cool features. But I think those are a lot of the ways that we don't always recognize, because they're not, when you click on accessibility, they're not in that list of features, but they're all a bunch of accessibility options that as a teacher you can go ahead and tap into.
Great, nicely stated, Sean. There are a number of questions. I don't know that we're going to have enough time to answer them all during this break, but we'll try to leave some time at the end. But one of the questions that came up, this is for you, Kara. So with these accessibility features, if you have an older Chromebook, how far back do some of these go back?
Yeah, that's a great question. These accessibility features should be available on whatever Chromebook you're using. So
Your device is, because like we've taken, the cool thing about Chromebooks is they don't suck up a lot of memory. So we've taken old Windows computers and old Mac computers that weren't very feasible, and we've basically repackaged them with things like Neverware and turned them into now fast, quick Chromebooks that are totally up to date, even though they don't have that much memory on them.
And then there is a question. There is a quick question, and then we'll get back to the presentation around PDFs and using select-to-speech with scanned PDFs. So either one of you want to take that one? So the question was around scanned PDFs, and obviously, if you just scan the PDF, then there may not be any text, it's just an image. So there may be some work that you need to do to convert that PDF to where it's actual text, and then select to speak should work on that once you do that.
Image, yeah, obviously not, but like the things I mentioned, Google Lens and Google Lookout, and on a Chromebook per se, but on an Android device or other device, it'll go ahead and read it live right there as you're looking at the or the file or the paper literally in front of a student that's on their desk, if we still use paper at this point.
Right, so at that point, it's using artificial intelligence to analyze that image and try to extract some of the text and convert it into text so that it can be read aloud on the fly. So in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it back over to Kara. So Kara, do you want to continue with the presentation? We'll keep an eye on the questions here and flag some of them so that we can come back to them at the end.
great. So let's go ahead and dive into some features for improved motor interactions. So before I hop back into presentation, I just wanted to show you here on my screen, so in Docs, for instance, there is voice typing. So if you go to Tools and Voice Typing and enable that, there's a microphone here. So this can be really great for, we've heard in certain circumstances where students are just having trouble getting their thoughts flowing and they're not able to type it out. And so teachers will allow them to dictate into Docs and just start talking into it. And then they can develop their stories and paragraphs later on, but it's just a good tool to get them to start thinking. And then we also have our built-in dictation feature, which is you can enable in accessibility settings, and then there's a microphone here at the bottom of the screen. And you can speak into the microphone, and for instance, if you're in an edit field, then you can, for instance, if you're in a URL and you want to search for puppies, then you can do that. So I'll just do that real quick. Puppies. And then it shows up here. Okay. And then next we have our on-screen keyboard, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate this too. So this can be turned on through accessibility settings and on-screen keyboard. So this is helpful when you're using a touchscreen or tablet, but it can also be really helpful for those that are not able to type physically on a keyboard. So anytime that you put your cursor into a text field, so again, I'll go back to search. This on-screen keyboard will appear automatically at the bottom portion of your screen. So whether you're using this with a mouse, a touchpad, or some people even use it with a connected joystick, this should work for you. And there's also a handwriting mode. And you can just toggle on and off the handwriting mode in the keyboard. And so for instance, I have a few teammates on my core team that have repetitive stress injury, and they say that typing for the entire day at work has really been causing them a lot of pain. So they've been actually switching to handwriting mode. And when you do that, the whole area becomes a canvas for you, and you can use your mouse or a stylus as an alternative way to input text. And then as you handwrite, the suggestion of what typed word appears the same, the auto suggestions appear if you were physically typing. So kind of like if you're typing on your phone and suggestions appear. And then you can just minimize the keyboard by clicking this. So go ahead and turn that off for now. And then go back into my presentation. So next we have automatic clicks, and this is available also in the accessibility settings of Chromebook. And this feature makes it possible to simply hover over a given item, and then the Chrome operating system will click for you. And you can also set the amount of time that you want to hover over the item. And essentially a little circle appears, and then it narrows in on the item and will click for you without you having to put any pressure at all on the touchpad. So I have a, let's see. So I can demonstrate that real quick. So again, I'll go to accessibility settings, automatic clicks, and there's a menu here that allows you to right click, left click. You can change the positioning of the menu on the screen so that it's not in your way. You can pause the click. And then there's also a scroll option here. So if you want to scroll up and down the page, or if there happens to be a left and right navigation option, you can do that as well. And then before you turn it off, it just gives you a message here, making sure that that was actually what you want to do before you turn it off, and that it was intentional. Okay. And we also have a number of different ways to customize the touchpad settings and physical keyboard settings to make it work for you. So touchpad settings, this can be specifically used for individuals who physically aren't able to push down to click something. So tap to click, for instance, let's say this lets you lightly tap instead of physically pushing down on a key. And then there's tap dragging. So this really goes hand in hand with tap to click. So if you want to rearrange your Chrome tabs, for instance, your icons at the bottom of your shelf, for example, then you can lightly tap and then drag versus needing to click down with some force and drag. And then on the physical keyboard settings side, we have sticky keys. So for those that may have difficulty holding down multiple keys at the same time, so for example, if you're capitalizing letters, rather than holding down Shift and that letter, you can hold down one key at a time versus being required to hold down those multiple keys at a time. And you can also adjust the keyboard repeat rate and the delay before repeating for users who tend to hold down a key for too long. And we're also really excited to announce that Switch Access will be coming out on Chromebooks this fall. And this is really meant for users with more significant mobility challenges, and it allows them to interact with their device and with the operating system using one or more switches. So Switch Access automatically scans the items on your screen and then makes a selection for you with the switch. So captions and making content easier to hear. We also have mono audio. So this is used for anyone who may have limited hearing in one ear over the other. And this feature can be really helpful so you don't lose sound in stereo. So it will just essentially play the same sound out of both speakers. We also have the ability to customize caption styles. So a few of the settings here that you can customize are the text size, text color. You can adjust the font, shadow, opacity, and background colors. And you also have an option there's an Android app called Live Transcribe, and this is available on Chromebooks. So if you search and install in the Play Store for Live Transcribe, you can get real-time captions of spoken audio. And there's a number of different languages that you can choose from. And you can actually save these transcripts for later notes if you'd like to. I think it saves for 3 days, and you can copy and paste those also into a Docs document if you want to save them for a longer period of time. So I'll take a quick break here, and if there are any questions, or if Sean, if you have any anecdotes that you would like to share about any of those features, I think it would be good to do a quick pause before we get into extensions.
I'll share a couple of things really quick. First, the voice typing is huge. Understand that for all the kids, it's still their voice, right? Yes, it's typing it on the screen, but I would much rather have a student who might only be able to handwrite 3 words or type maybe 1 sentence, who can sit there and verbalize enough to give me like a full paragraph of information. Great, I want the paragraph. I want more of your voice. It's still their voice. We're still empowering their voices to speak and share and express themselves. I would also, beyond that, even mention platforms that allow you to extend that through things like video as well for students that will auto caption and transcribe it. Things like Screencastify that'll record student things. There's also add-ons that she'll probably be getting to called Kaizena, which in a Google Doc, it lets you leave video or audio comments and feedback for students. So for kids who would never read the text comments or things that you leave, or would never give you feedback in text that way, that's available, Kaizena. Sticky keys and delay are great for our kids who either lay on a keyboard or who have certain mobile dexterity issues that can't quite press hard enough or enough to make it happen. And in terms of switches, yes, we've been using them for a while in conjunction with Android devices, where we've had like a chair-mounted Android device and a student with a joystick or a switch, like the Bluetooth that was shown on the screen. But having it connected to full-on Chromebooks so that way that student can feel fully incorporated into the class like all the rest of the students, that's a huge leap forward. And it's going to mean so much for a lot of our kids who have those physical mobility issues, but still have just as bright of a mind, something even more so than the other kids in the class, because they just want to go and create and make and tell their story as much as any of the rest of the kids. So now that they can do it with those and a Chromebook too, it's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And Sean, there's a question here. I'll read it out loud. What happens if you have a client who needs an alternative keyboard? And I think you flagged that one as one you would answer.
She was getting through some of the types of keyboards. I oftentimes would set up alternative Bluetooth keyboards that would function with Android devices, but they can function along with Chromebooks too. You just have to set it up. Usually the Bluetooth ones are the best. I've got a few examples and options. I don't know if they're in the link, so if somebody wants to message me individually about that, I could share some of the ones that I've used.
And Kara, there are a number of questions. First of all, people are really excited about switch access. They want to know when it's coming in more detail. And if people want to go back and review, for instance, there were some questions about Zoom, and once you're zoomed in, how do you move around? How do you exit it? And I'm sure you're going to share this later on, but what would you recommend to them? What's the best place to go to learn more?
Yeah, great question. This is in the resources, and so we have Help Center articles for Chromebooks and for Chromebook accessibility specifically. So those are all listed in the resources. And if you have any questions, you can just do a quick Google search and you should be able to go directly to our Help Center there.
Great. So we have a few minutes left. So do you want to continue, Karen, and just we may not get through all of these extensions and apps, but they're included in the handout as well. And we'll be updating the handout with a few of the ones that Sean mentioned as well.
Yeah, sure. And I can just quickly go over these because I also am curious as to what other folks have been using and what's been successful. And Sean, if you have any other tips and tricks on extensions as well, it'd be really helpful to hear from you. So I'll just go over what we have here quickly, and then hopefully we'll have some time to get into that. So really, all of the extensions that we've had here, this comes from a number of teachers and educators that we've talked to, and we've collected this list of extensions that they've been leveraging to further help customize their students' experiences on Chrome. So to start, we have Stay Focused, and this essentially limits the time that you spend on each site. So it's helpful in that it helps set the time limits for the sites that you're on, and can be really helpful for students that have ADHD or any sort of focusing or processing challenges. We also like to mention Magic Scroll. So this is a web reader, and it helps to remove clutter and distraction from any busy sites, so you can really focus on the core content. And then AdBlock Plus, that's essentially removes all ads, and again, it's used to reduce clutter and distraction. And then increasing visibility and reducing eye strain. So Beeline Reader, we've heard a really, this is a really interesting one. We've heard a lot of great things about this one. And it's most beneficial for anyone who has dyslexia. So essentially it helps to color code blocks of text. So for example, if you have a block of text, it will make the end of the first line the same color as the beginning of the next line. So red leads into red, blue leads into blue, etc. And this helps people to be able to tell where their eyes should go on the page. And it also supports a dyslexic-friendly font. Google Color Enhancer, this is helpful for anyone that's colorblind. So it lets you choose what type of color blindness you have, and then it filters the color on the page to be a little bit more visible for you. And then Magix. So this is great for if you need to take a physical piece of paper and then view it with magnification, higher contrast, or color inversion. So it works with your built-in Chromebook camera or an attached document reader, and then you can magnify. And then the last set is improving content interaction. So we also hear a lot of great things about Read and Write, and it offers really great text-to-speech and word production. It also uses highlighting. There's a picture dictionary, voice notes, and then Co-Writer is another one that we hear a lot of good things about, and it also has excellent word production and
Hey,
a lot of great support for grammar and spelling. Yes.
I'm so sorry. This is Laura. I'm just following the chat, and it looks like your slides aren't actually moving along with like we can only see the green slide that says like custom. There we go. Okay, now they're moving.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry.
Sorry about that. Okay. So yes, Co-Writer again has excellent word prediction and a lot of great support for grammar and spelling. And then Duelist is our last one. So this is interesting because it helps students organize their screen a little bit better. So let's say you have instructions in one window, and then the actual assignment is in another window. Duelist lets you choose screen configuration with just one click. So for example, you could make the instructions take up 1/3 of the screen, and then the actual assignment take up the remaining 2/3 of the screen. And then when you're done, you can just go back to the default in one click. And then AAC Clicker Communication App. This is something that's available on the Chrome Web Store, and it works offline. There's a great integration already with Google Drive. And this is a partnership that we have with Cricksoft. And there's also the acapella children's voices that we talked about earlier. Those are also available here. Great. And Sean, did you want to talk about any more?
I guess any slides about them or anything, but I'll just speak to them, and we can throw them in the chat. Clicker that you mentioned also has a bunch of other ones like Clicker Docs and Clicker Connect. So it isn't even necessarily has to be full AAC, which that or Voice for You does for students who need entire verbalizations. But Clicker Docs and Clicker Connect just help students who need a few picture symbols and maybe some suggestions for text when writing or reading. So that's another good one. Even beyond the ones that are quote unquote normally thought of as accessibility, we'll use regular apps, let's say even a Google Maps, you know, and it's got wheelchair routes that our kids can study. And then we'll use something like Tour Creator, where we do travel training for our students with disabilities so that they can learn, you know, which subways and how to get around the city. And we can practice doing that even in standard apps like that. Other good ones that I want to mention, even for basic visualizations and things built into Docs, so you can build charts and picture symbols to communicate using simple Google Drawings or lucid chart diagrams inside of your Google Docs. She mentioned Read and Write, which is probably one of my favorites, along with Co-Writer, heavily for students. But you know, even simpler ones like Visor or Beeline Reader, just for basic focus when students are reading, as well as just math visualization apps like Math Learning Center built right in. Those are some really nice ones where you get your students an opportunity to see things in different formats, to have it differentiated across wide context forums, so that way they can see and hold it in whatever variety of learning manners they need. But we ramble on.
Great, thanks. And I'm showing slides 41 and 42 for those of you that didn't see that. I'm sorry that my screen wasn't sharing.
I also wanted to mention we will have this list of the apps or the extensions that are shown on the slides that were not shown. Those will be on the handout as well. So there's another way that you can get the links and go right to the Chrome Web Store so that you can install those extensions on your Chromebook. So we're at about 5 minutes left. I also want to acknowledge Laura Allen from Google is also joining us. So welcome, Laura. Great to have you with us as well.
Thanks so much.
So we have a number of questions here. I can see that either Sean or Kara have been answering a number of them. So we'll see if we can get through a few of these. And then I also need to have a couple or a minute or so at the end just to share some final thoughts here. Let's see. Here's a question. I'm just scrolling up here. I have low vision, so whatever I can see is what I'm going to go to first. Is there a way to use voice typing to type directly into Google Slides and not go to speaker notes?
Copied and pasted from notes. So if there's a better answer to that, I'm not aware of it.
And then I'm actually
actually just real quick on that one. So there isn't a way at this time through Google Slides voice typing to do so, but you could, in theory, you could use the Chromebook dictation feature to type directly into the body of any slide, if that would be helpful at all.
Right, so you would select the text placeholder and then use the dictation feature to enter your text. Is that what you're
exactly?
Right.
Yep.
And then very timely question. Some people were asking about remote connections. So I'm guessing that's to provide some remote coaching, remote support. So what are your thoughts, Sean, Kara, and Laura? Because I think that's a question on a lot of people's minds.
In a large sense, there's a reason that like a lot of the schools are all using Google Classroom for this remote instruction and all of that, because it is just a collaborative space. But it does offer that ability, like I said, to differentiate the instruction, to push out whatever accessible, capable things there are for students. One about Chromebooks is that they're easy to manage from a distance. With G Student, you can set up and push out accessibility features from a distance. So as long as they're connected to a network somewhere, somehow, it doesn't matter where they are, we can be like, hey, we need to push this extension or this add-on to this group of students because they're going to need it. And it's pretty easy to manage even from a distance.
Great.
make the point that we addressed all the built-in accessibility features first, because keep in mind, there are a lot of awesome things with the add-ons and extensions, but all the built-in things work better first, right? Because they'll work across everything. So, you know, go the built-in stuff, and then if that doesn't totally fulfill your need, then move to the add-ons and extensions.
You also mentioned the learning curve with some of the extensions as well. So that's also needs to be considered. You know, they don't always have the same interface and the same way of doing things. So that's something else to take into consideration. So it takes a little bit of time to learn some of them. All right, so we are right at 3 o'clock. There's one last thing that we would love for you to do for us. First of all, thank you everyone for attending this afternoon's webinar. We hope that you found it helpful and useful. I want to thank our co-presenters, Kara Booker and Sean Arnold. Also want to thank our captioner, Jane. Some of you were asking how we were providing the captions on Zoom. That is how. We have a live captioner who joined us this afternoon to provide that captioning support. So thank you, Jane. And as always, thank you to our operations person at CAST, Leslie O'Callaghan. She always does a great job of keeping an eye on the chat and posting all of the links. Again, a reminder, this session was recording, and the recording, if you want to go back and review, will be posted to the same page where you found the handout and where you registered for the webinar. So there'll be a recording, and there's also a handout, and I'll go back and update that handout with some of the links that were shared. So thank you so much, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye. And take care of yourselves. Be safe. Be kind.